Great. So good afternoon, everyone. I don't think I've met everyone on the call, so nice to meet you all. I'm Joe Husbands, the Learning Development Consultant here at Cornerstone Resources, and I'm joined by my colleague Rob Burley, who's one of our directors at Cornerstone. He'll be on the call mainly for if any questions come up in the chat. We haven't got a designated Q&A section in this call today, but if you do have a question and we have time at the end, we'll see how we go, and Rob might be able to jump in there. But if we don't have time, we'll take your questions away and we'll come back to you afterwards through your consultant if you're one of our clients. Over the next 30 minutes, we're going to look at some upcoming changes to statutory sick pay, which I'll refer to as SSP throughout this call. Over the next couple of years, there's going to be a number of employment law reforms coming through the Employment Rights Act 2025. Some of these are larger structural changes, but others are smaller adjustments that can still have a real practical implication for organisations day to day. And this is where SSP falls. On the surface, it can sound like a technical payroll change, but it can influence things like how short sickness absences are handled, how absence is recorded, and the conversations managers have when people return to work as well. So today, our aim is to simply give you a clear overview of what's changing, what the practical implications are for, or might be for you as an employer, and a few questions you might want to start thinking about within your organisation. As I've mentioned, today's session will be recorded and we'll share the slides afterwards as well. So let's get started. What are we specifically going to cover today? So what SSP is and what's changing from April 2026, what the changes mean practically for your organisation, how the reforms may affect absence levels and managers' decisions, and then key questions and priorities as well for you to consider within your organisation. So let's start off with a quick check-in. I did mention if you were on the call at the start, I just want a couple of points in this call. I'll ask for a bit of light reflection and for your view on certain things. So if in the chat you could just have a look at this question and ask yourself, which statement about SSP is currently correct? So do you think A, SSP starts from the first day of sickness, B, SSP starts after 3 unpaid waiting days, C, all workers automatically qualify, or D, SSP can be paid for 52 weeks? What do you think's the answer?
It looks like most people are going B.
Yeah, see a lot of answers coming through. That's great. Yeah, so the answer is B. Currently, SSP begins on day 4 of sickness absence. The first 3 days are what we call waiting days, which means no SSP is paid during that period. That's one of the things that's actually changing under the upcoming reforms, which I'll come on to shortly. So what is SSP, just so we're all on the same page? SSP is the minimum legal sick pay entitlement for eligible employees in the UK. If an employee is off work due to illness and meets the qualifying conditions, the employer must pay SSP, so it's paid through payroll in the same way as wages. Many organisations offer company sick pay schemes, which are more generous than this. And for example, some employers offer full pay for a certain number of weeks, but SSP represents the legal minimum that employers must provide. And the reforms we're discussing today are being introduced through the Employment Rights Act 2025, and one of those aims is to extend access to sick pay. So why are these changes being introduced? The government's stated aim is to make sick pay accessible to a wider group of workers, particularly people in lower paid roles or very part-time roles who currently fall outside the qualifying criteria. So there are 3 broad areas the reforms focus on. The first is when sick pay begins. At the moment, as we mentioned earlier, there are 3 waiting days before SSP starts. The second is who qualifies. So currently, employees must meet a minimum earnings threshold to be eligible. And the third area is what we might call absence visibility. So if more absences trigger SSP, organisations may see short sickness absences appearing more clearly in payroll and absence data. So we'll unpack each of these in a bit more detail shortly. But before looking at the changes, it's helpful to understand what the current framework looks like. So under the current system, SSP begins on day 4, as we've mentioned, of sickness absence. The first 3 days are those unpaid waiting days. Employees must also earn at least £125 per week on average, which is known as the lower earning limit. The current SSP rate for 2025-26 tax year is £123.25 per week, and it can be paid for up to 28 weeks during a period of sickness absence. Another important point is that SSP applies to employees, so workers or self-employed individuals generally do not qualify at the moment, and the employer must have done some work under their employment contract as well. An SSP is payable for a maximum of 28 weeks per period of incapacity as well. So understanding this framework helps highlight exactly what is changing in April 2026. Many employers offer company sick pay, which is more generous than SSP as well. So under the Employment Rights Act 2025, two key reforms are expected to come into effect from April 2026. So the first change is that SSP will start from day one of sickness absence. The three waiting days we've talked about so far, they're going to be removed. The second change is that the earnings threshold will be removed as well. So this means more employees will become eligible for SSP. Managers don't need to memorize all this legislation behind the changes, but it's really helpful for them to understand the practical impact that it will have on them as well. So that's something I'll come on to a bit later on. But if we focus on the first change in a bit more detail to start off with, as you listen to the changes being explained, just take a moment to think about where this might show up in your day-to-day operations, which we'll come on to in a second. But currently, as I've said, SSP begins on day 4 of sickness absent. That means day 1, 2, and 3 are unpaid. Then from April, we're expecting to see them removed. One of the possible implications of this is that very short absences, even a single day, may now trigger statutory sick pay. That means short absences may become more visible within payroll and absence data too. And in some cases, they may also carry a direct payroll cost. So at this point, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts really. Where might this show up first in your day-to-day operations? So, for example, you might be thinking about one-day absences and the impact that could have, particular times of year or patterns like Mondays or Fridays. Where do you think this might show up in your day-to-day operations? Just type your thoughts in the chat if you have any. Great, see some answers coming through. So yeah, we've got things like Mondays and Fridays. Absolutely, that's something people are mentioning. Yeah, one-day absences impact on comms between teams to get this on payroll. Absolutely, and that's something that's going to be really key. Communication across teams. Yeah, at least one day a week, increasing one day sick on either a Monday or Friday. Absolutely. So these are the kind of things people are saying. And we can see there's some consistency here too. Yeah, for some organizations, there might be minimal impact as well as they already have company sick pay starting at minimum 1 month at full pay and increase with service. So yeah, some people have company sick pay in place, which is, yeah, like we say, we're talking about the legal minimum today. So it's great. Thanks for your responses there. We're seeing a mix of things there. Some people are about payroll and eligibility at times. That's some of the things we're hearing, but others think about short absences and even manager conversations as well. So I can see communications come through here as well. Great. But in reality, most organizations will probably see a bit of all of these things. And then change two. So the second major change relates to eligibility. Current employees must earn at least £125 per week on average in order to qualify for SSP, as I've mentioned. But under the reforms, that earning threshold will be removed. That means employees who previously did not meet that threshold, for example, very part-time staff or lower paid employees, may now become eligible for SSP. So one additional detail worth being aware of this related to this point is that employees with very low or irregular earnings, the SSP payable will be the lower of the standard SSP rate or 80% of their normal weekly earnings. So while more employees may become eligible, the payment itself may still be lower for those working very small numbers of hours. For organizations with larger number of part-time or lower paid roles, this may increase the number of employees who qualify for SSP. For others, there might be minimal impact here as well. But one practical step organizations can take is to estimate their potential exposure to this change based on the changes I've just discussed there. So a useful starting point is to identify employees who currently earn below the £125 weekly threshold. Those employees are the group most likely to become newly eligible for SSP once the earning threshold is removed. And on the slide, you can see the national minimum wage rates expected from April 2026. By comparing these hourly rates with weekly earnings, organisations can roughly estimate which employees may fall below the current SSP threshold. This doesn't require complex analysis. Often a simple review of payroll data can give you a fairly clear indication here. So like I say, this slide will be sent around and you can have a look at this yourself after the call. If we translate that into hours worked, we can estimate which employees may fall below the threshold. So, for example, someone aged 21 or over earning £12.71 an hour would fall below the threshold if they worked roughly under 10 hours per week. For employees aged 18 to 20, the figure is slightly higher at around 11.5 hours per week. And for under 18s or apprentices earning £8 a week, sorry, £8 per hour, the threshold would be roughly 15.5 hours per week. So in practical terms, the groups most likely to become newly eligible for SSP are, as I've mentioned, those very part-time staff, casual or 0 hours workers, students working limited hours, younger workers and apprentices too. So for some organisations, this may slightly increase the number of people who qualify for SSP. And looking at those examples of very part-time hours, I'd be interested to know whether this group exists in your organisation for you. Just as a reflection point, just to give you an immediate thinking on what we've talked about. If you'd like to, just type yes, no, or not sure in the chat in answer to this. So when you look at these groups I've mentioned on the right-hand side, do you think your organisation could be impacted? Great, so we've got some no's coming through here. Yeah, not at present. Like I say, if you do feel you will be, or you're not sure, do do have a look, obviously after the call, but you can also come to us at Cornerstone through your consultant, and they'll be happy to advise you and support you there. Yeah, so for a few people, this will impact you.
I mean, clearly there's going to be some sectors like care, hospitality, those who employ people potentially on 0 hours contracts who could well be impacted by this, and it's definitely worth being aware of what that impact could be. And equally, if you can get 80% of your pay when you're off sick, that could drive some behaviours that you might not be seeing currently. So managing absence will become more critical.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob. Great. So now let's move on to manager confidence and why that matters here. So while these reforms are legal changes, the practical impact often shows up in that everyday management. So particularly in how sickness absence conversations are going to be handled. So given what we've discussed today, it's clear that absence should be managed consistently across the team. And someone's already mentioned how communication is going to be really important across departments and teams. So this means that managers are on the front line of employment rights compliance. They don't need to be legal experts, but they do need to have the confidence and clarity around a few key skills. Things like having absence conversations, those return to work conversations, staying curious rather than accusatory, asking open questions, applying policies consistently. It's all well and good having a great policy, but we need to see them applied consistently to make them effective. Recognizing patterns over time, balancing support and accountability, recognizing when to escalate to HR and when not to, and then maintaining clear, accurate documentation throughout as well. So, like I say, managers don't need to be legal experts, but they do need to know and be able to have this skill set so they can have these conversations and know when to do what they need to do. Just to mention there, as we can provide at Cornerstone, we do offer a lot of leadership training, but we can also provide really bespoke training too, should you need any around any of these skill sets. But we also provide leadership training that's more bespoke and tailored to you, as well as our wider Lead with Confidence course that you can view on our website here, cornerstoneresources.co.uk. So coming on to those return to work conversations, because I just mentioned how important they're going to be for managers. They can be simple but very effective part of absence management. So when someone returns from sickness absence, short conversation can help managers check that the employee is feeling well enough to be back. It also gives the employee an opportunity to explain what happened during the absence. And it helps ensure the absence is also recorded accurately. These conversations are usually brief and can actually be quite informal too. But often they start simply with a check-in on well-being, asking how the person's feeling. It's helpful to listen first and allow the employee to explain the situation. And when appropriate, or where appropriate, managers may agree anything practical that helps the person ease back into that workday as well. These conversations are usually brief and informal, as I've mentioned, but it is encouraged that these things are recorded to help organisations manage absence fairly and consistently. So when these happen consistently and these conversations happen consistently and managers operate in a similar way or in the consistent way, they help organizations manage absence in that fair way and support employees appropriately too. So what might this mean in practice for employers? There are a few possible implications. First, more employees may qualify for SSP than under the current system. Second, short absences may trigger SSP payments from day one. And third, organisations may find that absence patterns become more visible through payroll or absence management too. So none of these changes necessarily mean that absence levels will increase, but they do mean organisations may want to ensure that their sickness absence is reported and recorded clearly, as I've said. So managers will play an important role here. The good news is that organizations do not need to make immediate changes right now. However, there are a few areas we're going to talk about now that you may want to review in preparation for April 2026. One area is this workforce exposure that I've got on screen and reviewing that. So, in other words, understanding how many employees currently fall below the SSP threshold, as we've talked about. Another area is absence policies and reviewing them. So organizations may want to review these procedures, return to work conversations that you have or templates you may have, and absence trigger points too. Organizations may also want to review their HR and payroll systems to ensure they're ready to handle these updated SSP rules. And finally, it can also be helpful to ensure managers feel confident discussing absence. As I've really mentioned, it's something I'll reiterate because it's going to be so important. This is how it will practically play out, all of this legislation. So, really focusing on your managers is going to be key here. So we do get asked some frequent questions that we get asked. I just want to touch on here and give you some answers to these, should they be sort of running around your mind, or these might come up in the future following the call too. So I just wanted to touch on some of these. So the first one is, do 0 hours workers qualify? So if classed as an employee, yes, yes, they do. Worker or self-employed status means no entitlement though. 0 hours workers are not automatically excluded from SSP because currently eligibility depends on average weekly earnings. Many 0 hours workers do not qualify today because their earnings fall below that threshold we've talked about. But once that threshold's removed, more casual and 0 hours workers will become eligible for SSP. So does SSP apply to part-time employees? Yes, SSP does. Doesn't depend on whether someone works full-time or part-time. It depends on whether they meet that criteria we've talked about. What happens if someone calls in sick for one shift, for example? Under the current rules, SSP doesn't start until day 4. But if the reforms are implemented as we expect, SSP will start from the first day of sickness absence, meaning short absences may trigger SSP. How is SSP calculated for irregular hours? So eligibility is based on average weekly earnings, usually calculated using the previous 8 weeks of pay, but payroll systems normally calculate this automatically as well. And then can employers ask for a GP note? Yes, employees normally self-certify sickness for the first seven days, but after this, employers can request medical evidence such as a fit note from a GP. And does SSP replace company sick pay? So no, as I've mentioned, it's the legal requirement. It's the minimum legal requirement. If a company provides enhanced sick pay, SSP is normally included within that payment as well. So like I say, if you have any more questions than this, do let us know. Do also let your consultant know too. They'll be happy to support you too. But as you reflect on these changes, there are a few useful questions organizations may want to ask themselves. So, for example, which employees currently earn below that 125 per week? How might the changes affect short-term sickness absence in your organization? Are absence reporting and recording procedures clear and consistently applied? Are managers confident having absence and return to work conversations? and our payroll and HR systems ready to handle the changes from April too. So even simple discussions around these questions can help organizations prepare well in advance as well. So I've mentioned a couple of times that we're here to support you. If these changes we've talked about today raise any questions with your organization, this is an area we can really provide support in. So, for example, we work with organizations to review and update absence policies and procedures. We also provide manager-focused trainings, as I've mentioned, on absence management and return to work conversations and generally the skills you'll need to be able to lead your people well and have those general difficult conversations or to provide feedback and things like that. Our HR consultants as well can provide practical advice on managing sickness absence day to day. And then also we can support organizations in understanding their workforce exposure to the SSP changes. So we can help you with some of that analysis that I talked about before too. In terms of takeaways for today, then, just to, I guess, repeat myself, but also make sure that you are taking away, I guess, what we'd hope you'd take away today. SSP is that minimum legal sick pay entitlement in the UK. It is the legal minimum. The aim of the reforms, so the reforms are linked to the Employment Rights Act 2025 and aim to expand access to sick pay. We'll now have day one entitlement to SSP from April 2026. That 3-day wait is removed. More employees will qualify. That earning threshold is being removed, which extends eligibility to those lower paid workers. And also, good absence management matters more than ever now. Having things recorded, but also people having the skill set to have these conversations and having the policies and procedures in place is going to be really important. So if you do have any questions, do let us know. And like I say, you can also follow up with your consultant afterwards. Something I did want to mention, which again, a bit like this session is one of the aspects of the reforms coming through the Employment Rights Act in 2025. We've got a number of sessions across the rest of the year. Some are you can pay for, some are free as well, which aim to focus in on certain elements of the changes coming in and giving you that sort of deeper look. As part of the series, you can, like I say, there are some that you can pay for. You can pay directly on our website, £99 plus VAT for anyone in your organization to come and join that one. But also via the website, you can also fill in a form. It's on the same page, so you can decide whether to use your monthly allocated hours or pay the £99 plus VAT. You can fill a form in there and let us know if you'd like to use your hours, and you can use 1 hour for the paid session. Again, just for the whole organization. You can have as many people on that one as you like. So there's a mix of sessions we've got. You can have a look at this on our website. It's on our training events page, should you want to look at that. We've got around 2 sessions per month through to the end of the year. Just to mention, we also have a what you need to know page on the website for the Employment Rights Act 2025. SSP is one of these changes. We've got all the other changes that we're aware of and we're expecting, and we detail a bit of what you need to know there too. But just as we come to the end of the session, and like I say, we've got a whole series through 2026. If you have a second, it'd be great if you could provide me with some feedback just to know if this kind of hit the mark with what you're expecting from today, or if there's anything else you'd like from these sessions, or a different sort of delivery style, or if you actually found it was really valuable and this is the kind of thing you'd like to see in the sessions. So I will just put the link in the chat if you're on your laptop, as well as the code should you need it. And you can provide us with a little feedback if you have a chance, if you have time. But yeah, thank you very much for attending today. I look forward to seeing you in the future sessions. Don't know, Rob, have you seen any questions come through? Or is that,
Yeah, I've been tapping away
yeah,
a few.
yeah,
So a few sort of questions that have come in, like what happens when 28 weeks SSP expires and there is no further entitlement to sick pay unless you have company sick pay that goes beyond 28 weeks. So they would move to a no pay situation. I also had asked when we're going to be updating policies. In terms of the standard policy, if you're a retained customer, the policy changes are minimal. It's just referencing the entitlement to day one and removing the lower earnings limit. However, if you want to take the opportunity to review how you manage sickness absence, so how many absences would trigger a formal meeting, for example, then the best thing to do is to speak to your consultant and book in a meeting to review how you manage absence, because that will be a slightly different question. Also, I've been asked whether SSP applies during probation, and yes, the answer is it is a day one entitlement.
Great. Thanks, Rob. So yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for very much for attending today. I hope to see you again in the future. And like I say, I'll send around the slides following the session as well as the recording, so you have access to that, should you want to watch it again after the session. But yeah, thanks again and see you all soon.
Thank you, Joe.